Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is Dao De Jing, and we'll be covering verses 60 and 61. Line up to read the version that spoke most to you by typing exclamation point in the chat. Evanique, thank you for your courage, always going first.
Oh, you're welcome. So this one is from the Tao of Christ, a Christian reading of the Dao De Jing, and this is translated by Marshall Davis. So chapter 60. Governing a large nation is like frying a small fish. Too much poking ruins it. By simply obeying God, one can rule a vast nation. Evil will not be able to scare people. Religion will not be able to coerce people. Leaders will not be able to deceive people. When there is no fear, righteousness reigns.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Brian Nelson, or Penny.
Okay. This is, I'm going to read J.H. MacDonald.
Okay.
Governing a large country is like frying a small fish. Too much poking spoils the meat. When the Tao is used to govern the world, then evil will lose its power to harm the people. Not that evil will no longer exist, but only because it has lost its power. Just as evil can lose its ability to harm, the master shuns the use of violence. If you give evil nothing to oppose, then virtue will return by itself.
Thank you very much, Penny. Next up, I have David.
Okay, I'll do the DC Lin. Ruling a big country as you would fry a small fish. Who rules the world in accord with Tao would find that the spirits lose their power. It is not that the spirits lose their power, but that they cease to do people harm. It is not only that they cease to do people harm, the sage himself also does no harm to the people. When both do not do each other harm, virtue or power flows towards them.
Thank you very much, David. Let me see, I'm sorry. Next up, I have Katie.
Yeah, we haven't read the Stephen Mitchell yet.
We have not, but it wouldn't matter anyway. We would love to hear your version. So,
Okay, great. Governing a large country is like frying a small fish. You spoil it with too much poking. Center your country in the Tao and evil will have no power. Not that it isn't there, but you'll be able to step out of its way. Give evil nothing to oppose and it will disappear by itself.
Thank you for reading that, Katie. Now, is there anyone else that would like to read the version that they most appreciated for verse 60? If not, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and read the Ursula Le Guin translation. She titles it "Staying Put." Rule a big country the way you cook a small fish. If you keep control by following the way, troubled spirits won't act up. They won't lose their immaterial strength, but they won't harm people with it. Nor will wise souls come to harm. And so, neither harming the other, these powers will come together in unity. So, with that, I'm going to briefly ask, before Jason, we go to you really quickly, is if Margaretha, I know you just arrived, if she would like to read her version in Bahasa. Or Brian, if you wish. Give one last up.
I'll take later because I'm not ready yet, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. No problem. Brian, would you like to read the version of verse 60, or if you're not ready, that's fine.
Which Brian are you thinking?
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian Allenby.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not. All right, so let's go to Jason then. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think this chapter is well, is a simple basics because Ronald Reagan he make a State of the Union speech on his last term, and I listened to his speech. Actually, it's very well. He's on his peak time, right? So the collapse of the USSR, and he tried to prove the Lazarsville. I don't know if it should be right or not, but basically the free market and the individualism is always win. That's he did, and I find out the translation he did. He interpret well. Okay, so okay, I just follow the first sentence. I just use his translation. So govern a large nation as you will cook a small fish. Do not overdo it. That's Reagan's word, but I put it in parentheses. It's not in the original text. So when Tao prevail over the world, the ghosts lose their spiritual powers. Not only do the ghosts lose their spiritual powers, but even the spirits also do not harm people. Not only do the spirits not harm people, even the sage does not harm people either. Because neither harms, the virtual returns to the world. Something I'd like to mention here is, I think the second stanza is easy, talking about when the Tao is prevailed through over the kingdom. The ghosts lose their spiritual power. I think here has three words here. Tao, of course, and I would assume we all know Tao. And the third is something we can follow. And the three things we talk about. One is Gui, which is ghost, okay, and in general translated as ghost. And another we call it Shen, which is spirit, okay. And then he talk about the sage. Think about the situation. Some translation translate as evil. I think in the Western culture depend. Ghost. Like in German, we translate as a spirit, okay, Geist. Okay, so in China at that time, ghost is kind of like something immaterial but probably visible. Okay, so there's a lot of story about the ghost. So the ghost is not necessarily doing evil. They kind of play the revenge and the reward. So if you owe somebody money, never return, and the person die, you never take care of the person, give the money to his son, and the dead person will become a ghost to haunt you. Or if you help somebody and he die and you are in trouble, the ghost of the dead may come here to help you. So the ghost is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. So, but something visible. Shen is another level, which is spiritual, spirit. If you remember in the early chapter, they talk about the spirit of basin. Spirit is something immaterial and also invisible. So ghosts have some power of the spiritual power, okay, on that. Then next level will be the material person, which is the sage, the ruler. Will deal. So if you think about these three things, the ghost, the spirit, and the sage and the heaven, okay, they kind of influence our daily life. So here he talk about if the Tao is prevail, the ghost will lose its power of the spirit, and the spirit will not interfere with the people, and then the sage will not interfere. Okay, the people also. That's the Taoism ideal. Okay, so this government is the best government. So kind of this kind of thinking, and it matches with what Ronald Reagan is talking about, the individualism and the free market in today's term. Okay, so basically the last sentence talk about the both are not harming. Okay, so both means the material thing, which is the sage, and immaterial thing, which is the ghost and the spirit. Therefore, the virtue will return to the world. So again, it matches with the whole political philosophy, basically the least interference, and then the world, the people will take care of themselves. I will stop here. Thank you.
Aman, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I actually think Jason did a masterful job explaining sort of the levels of metaphysics at work in this chapter between ghost, spirit, and sage. In fact, as he was speaking, I'm thumbing through my copy of Judge D, the Celebrate Cases of Judge D, because I remember very specifically there's a portion in this book where the judge goes to a graveyard to call a ghost witness to a crime, which kind of speaks to the Chinese mindset of the time, how this wasn't superstition, this wasn't just something that was sort of fringe, it was a integral part of the society and considered worthy of attention for the possible consequences that they could reap in the world about you. I do think there's a tie between this chapter, chapter 60, and chapter 61, that is also a subtextual commentary on Confucian values, particularly the values surrounding the family. But I think it'll come out more in chapter 61. Other than that, I really appreciate Jason's translation. And when you see it and hear some of the other ones, you can hear where translators were either trying to stay close to the original text or interpret the text in a way to where our modern sensibilities could make sense of this sort of cosmological structure that it doesn't fit in a modern society now, that we don't share with the people who were the audience for this text.
Actually, I really agree. Jason, you want to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on Aman talk about the Judge D. I'm so surprised you read this book. I don't know.
I love that book.
I don't know how many of you know this book, the Judge D. Okay. There's a two version. I don't know, Aman, you are reading I think the author is some from European countries, and that's a totally make up. Okay.
Yeah, Van Gogh.
Okay, yeah, that's another version. And then they have the Chinese tradition of the Judge D. So kind of like a Chinese Formosa. Okay, Chinese homes. Okay. So that's a interesting story. And yeah, I think that Aman bring up the concept of the ghost. You will bring the judge, the real judge, will be able to bring the witness, okay, and from the hell, okay, the ghost, and then witness something, and then so that's the different kind of tradition. Yeah.
So thank you, Jason and Aman, for getting us started. Now, if you would like to comment on verse number 60, please type an exclamation point in the chat and to share your thoughts on this particular verse. So we'll start with Evanique, followed by Margarita, followed by Dave.
I have a question because Jason or Armand, can you guys distinguish between the ghost and the spirit? Like, is the ghost a judge, or is that just from that book that Armand was talking about? Like, is the ghost evil and the spirit good?
Okay. Okay. So the judge is the people. Okay, is the people. Okay. The real people, and the historical, they have these people. Chinese called 狄仁杰. Okay, so that's a Chinese judge. Okay, and the ghost. Okay, put this way, ghost. The concept of ghost not necessarily bad. So somebody died. So for example, at least in the Taiwan tradition, if your relatives die, they become ghost. Okay, they become ghost. So that's kind of like in a different other world. Okay, so spirit is more on the invisible power. Okay, less tangible. Even ghost is not tangible. So less tangible than the ghost. So usually, if you know, because some call the yin yang eye, somebody have yin yang eye because we are in the yang world, right? So when the person dies in world, some people say they have yin yang eye. That means he can see ghost. All right. So some people say, but nobody will see spirit. Put it this way. Okay. And then that's I like to separate. And about the judge D, the judge is the person. Okay. And sometimes in the history, the person can judge the ghost. Okay. So it's not necessary ghost is higher than people or more powerful than people. It's not necessary.
Thank you.
Would you like to come? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as the story of Judge D is, like Jason was saying, it's almost like a Sherlock Holmes tale of ancient China, though he's sort of a more inside figure than an outsider in that sense. But his ability to call upon a ghost to be witness, to actually act as a witness within an officiating trial, was not a true story, but it was meant to be emblematic of how in an official capacity, the authority and relevance of the yin spirit that remains behind, the pull as opposed to the hun, could actually act in a very tangible and real way with the material world around you. So in sort of, I've been asked about Taoist concepts of the afterlife or soul before. There isn't an orthodox one. There isn't one that is universally shared across the board. There is a tradition within Chinese folk culture that informs many Taoist temples and practices of these two aspects of a soul, hun and po, and I'll actually put those here. Both actually contain the radical of ghost or gui within them. And the easy way for me to explain this is the soul under this conceptual structure is a biperforated yin yang. You have a yin, heavier, darker soul that exists and remains behind. That's the pole. And then you have the lighter, sort of ethereal, ascendant soul that leaves, the hun. And at death is simply the separation of these two in many traditional folk cultural values in China. So this is how that idea of ghost differs from the idea of spirit. Spirit is something already elevated, not united with another yin counterpart so much, and operates at the levels of sort of the ethereal or celestial. It's kind of the intermediary between the heavenly courts and the earthly order.
Thank you for that. Evanique. I'm sorry, Margarita, you're up next.
Yeah, is it possible for me to read Bahasa now?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I will explain a bit about the translation.
That'd be great.
Raja yang bijaksana dapat memerintah negeri besar demikian sederhana bagai hanya memasak seekor ikan kecil saja. Bila raja memegang pemerintahan berdasarkan Dao, maka negeri akan aman dan sejahtera sehingga iblis-iblis tidak menunjukkan kegaiban. Bukannya iblis-iblis tidak mampu melakukan kegaiban, melainkan mereka tidak suka menunjukkan kegaiban itu untuk mengganggu orang. Bukannya iblis-iblis tidak akan mengganggu orang, tapi raja yang budiman, berlaku welas asih, dan tidak membuat rakyat susah. Kedua belah pihak tidak akan membuat susah pada rakyat, maka kebajikannya bisa selaras dan bersama-sama membawa kebahagiaan semua rakyat. So, I think this is quite interesting because as everybody said, this is the first time I ever heard such metaphysic component in Dao. But in Bahasa, the translation is like, we call it demons, like ghosts. Iblis, that's in plural. Iblis means like demon or ghost. And in this verse, it was mentioned that demons will not create problems, not because they can't, but because they're kind of, they want to live harmoniously with people, with human. It's quite interesting. There is this verse, I think this edition, because I can't see that in analog with the Chinese or the Jason's one. Even there's this one sentence, both the king, the king, and also the demon, they don't make problem. No, they don't create problem for the people. So as if like they collaborate. I don't know whether that also happened with in Chinese verse, but it's quite interesting. It seems that in this world, they already acknowledge there is this ghost or spirit, and human can work, can collaborate with them. Is that correct? Is that how we should see this? Thank you.
I mean, if Jason or Amon want to comment, go right ahead. But the Ursula Gwynn actually does say something along those lines. But I'll let Jason and Amon speak first.
Yeah, I think I should not call it the cooperate, but basically the immaterial world, so-called in world, is governed by the ghost and spirit, right? So that's a different story on the in world, and the yang world basically will be governed by the king, right? By the emperor. It's hard to say they are cooperate because they don't talk to each other. But basics, the king, the emperor, and in the yang world, which is this world, and the in world, the other world of the, you are called the demon, ghost, whatever, they will interfere our daily life, right? So So in Taoism's idea, the emperor of the yang world should do minimum work to interfere our life. And but since we don't have a way to control the inward, but if you have the Tao prevail, the inward, which have a ghost, have a spirit, also will not interfere our life. The words in the original text use the word "sang," which is hurting. So that means don't do damage to our world. So they put the word in the yang world, the king is not going to damage our life. And in the yin world, the ghost is not going to damage our life. So the De, will return to the world. So people knows what to do. That's the meaning of this text. That's why I go back to the first sentence. Deal with the big country, the large country, just like cook a small fish. Slowly, don't do it too quick. Don't use too big fire. Don't barbecue it. So that's the way of talking about.
Thank you for that, Jason. Dave, I know you're waiting, but I would like to just maybe read Ursula Le Guin's interpretation, if that would be okay with you. Just because it kind of speaks to what exactly Jason had just talked about. Thomas Jefferson would have liked the first stanza. Troubled spirits are kuei. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Ghosts, not bad in themselves, but dangerous if they possess you. Whaley reads the second stanza as a warning to believers in realpolitik. A ruler possessed by power harms both the people and his own soul. Taking it as counsel to the individual, it might mean that wise souls neither indulge nor repress the troubled spirits that may haunt them. Rather, they let those spirits energies be part of the power they find along the way. So that kind of speaks exactly to what Jason was just kind of saying. And it's a little bit anyway. I'll Dave, go ahead. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, my friend Joe. My scholarly translation here has a short paragraph that I think also addresses to the evil spirits and ghosts. And it references a word Kuei, I guess is a Chinese word.
That's the same word I tried to read, or Kwei. Yeah.
Yeah, are my evil spirits, or apparently that's what he translated evil spirits. In popular religion are the ghosts, the souls of people who have died without descendants to provide for them, or the souls of people who have died untimely, sometimes violent deaths. They cause all sorts of problems for the living. And I don't know if that means that no one is there to attend to their graves or something like that. But yeah, it's just interesting thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Brian.
I do have another question. I'll come back with it later, but I'm very interested now in this discussion. It sounds to me like a ghost is a power or an entity, spiritual or material, that derives its power from harm, or its evil power from harm done to it in the past. For example, dying an untimely death. So if I'm trying to understand the force of the Tao in terms of neutralizing, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm asking the question. Is the ghost neutralized because the Taoist leader did not do harm in the past and did not create vengeful ghosts?
Jason or Aman, I mean, I can.
I'm kind of wrapping my head around that. I do think there's a karmic element, you could say, in the sense that if you follow the Tao, you've provided no disharmony or disorder to disrupt spirits that are going to be out in the world at large. And so therefore there is sort of a reciprocity here. And that I think I mentioned this when Jason and I were talking. I do think there's a small distinction between sort of the Reagan era modern conservative laissez-faire idea of government and this very, very first sentence, which our second sentence, excuse me, when the Tao prevails over the world, the ghosts lose their spiritual power. But when the Tao prevails, it's not necessarily so much that one is to back off to allow the Tao to prevail, but when you are riding with that current, when you are going with how the Tao is, then what you will do will not be harmful or disruptive. And it's a subtle distinction, but it's this idea of truly laissez-faire. You don't even cook the fish. Let it be, eat it raw. But there is the metaphor here, to cook the fish. And so there is an action being taken. You have a goal in mind, but don't overdo it, don't overpoke it, don't over disturb it. You are, as the leader, are taking actions to guide your nation, but you do it gently, subtly, and with great sensitivity to how it's developing. And that has consequences that you don't only see in the corporeal realm. Those consequences unravel into the non-corporeal realm, and those come back to visit you, as it were. So I do think there is something almost karmic-like, but it's more cyclic than it is sort of a direct cause and effect. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense to me. I mean, that my interpretation of this is essentially that if you're following the way, that these spirits will not act up, so that essentially that you won't be disturbed by the spirits themselves. But if you deviate from the way, and then at that point you are like a person possessed by an evil spirit. That's the way I interpreted this this particular version, and what Ursula Le Guin was saying. Does that help, Brian, at all? Or would you like to? Thank you. I mean, if you have anything you want to follow up on, go ahead. Madeline, you're up next.
Yes, thank you, Jason and Aman and Joe for hosting. So I think by now I get the gist of the whole chapter. This is yet another question about the ghosts and spirits. It seems as if of course, these would have been things that would have been well known, concepts that would have been well known at the time it was written. It almost seems as if it's talking about three realms. There's the regular human realm of the sage who's doing his Do thing. And then there's the completely incorporeal realm of the spirits that might be a nature spirit or a dragon. And then there's this intermediate realm of ghosts that are spirits, but they were once alive and are visible and can still interact in the world. So they're kind of this mixed boundary layer between the other two.
That's an interesting thought. I had actually not thought about that aspect of it, that there'd be three boundaries.
Let me comment on Mandarin. Three things here. Okay, technically, well, it could be. I should say that it makes sense to talk about three realms. One is the ghost, one is the spirit, one is our real this world. Okay, but I think it's the spirit. The Chinese word is 神. Okay, in today's, if you read Bible, Chinese Bible, the 神 means God. Okay, that's today's meaning. And then in the ancient time, I don't see Shen has been used as God or gods. Okay, the God basically in the Taoism tradition will call it the creator, okay, or call it the so-called Di. Okay, I think in one of the chapters talk about this one. That means the first emperor. Okay, so. So in a way, I don't see it's that clear. It's like Western sense of the hell, this world, heaven, not this kind of sense of the three realms. But what is more on the ghost and the human and the spirit is something invisible. You know, if you look at, I think it's on the chapter 6, it's talking about the undying spirit of basin, right? So basics is like, if you think about the situation, a basin is just like a reservoir. There's water. Okay, so how much water they have is important for the agricultural society. So they have the spirit kind of control it. So it's hard to say it's a god or something. It's kind of like a Greek sense of a fairy, this kind of spirit. Okay, so that's my understanding, but not today's. If you take today's word, 神, that word spirit will translate as God. If in the Bible, that's the word for the God. Okay.
I also wanted to really quickly say to what Madeline was saying, I do think you're accurate that there are three layers at work here, and the idea of a tripartite world, heaven above, earth below, humans in between, is kind of reflected in this idea as well. I'm not really quick on my scholarship, so I'm sorry I don't have the name, but this idea of the effects of the departed in the world are really, really prevalent within Chinese culture. And many people have said ancestry worship was the first kind of worship within ancient China. And it was because of how prevalent this idea that these these ghosts, these departed individuals' souls continue to have a connection and a effect, not only in this world, but in our lives. There is what I said about my scholarship. I was looking, there is an old Chinese scholar who wrote a treatise basically trying to disprove this notion of ghost. And he had some very interesting ideas, like, when you see ghosts, why are they always dressed? Wouldn't it make sense that they wouldn't be? Or, you know, why is it only ever humans that you see ghosts? Shouldn't there be ghosts of animals? And if that's the case, wouldn't they be everywhere? He had this really sort of scrutinizing examination of this prevalent idea within Chinese culture. He was not a mainstream figure, but it speaks to how prevalent the ideas were within the ancient Chinese world, that one of these scholars sort of took it on himself to write the antithesis of the commonly held beliefs.
That is very interesting indeed. That provides a great deal of context just to show you how prevalent this was back in ancient China. So next up I have Kevin.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm two part. One is for Chinese character. One is Gui, ghost or devil or demon. It's from this the structure. Normally Chinese characters top down or left to right. The general. This one is the top down. Top is like one person wear the mask, basically wear ugly, or another side it's like a tail. You look like some insect, but it's not good. This concept come up. I'm used by folk culture, like mainland China. Let's see, if one person died, this person live another world, which called Gui. Then they got also, we cannot see it. They have house, everything ordinarily use. That's why if you see the tradition, they buried with a house, you simulate money, everything else. So second word is Shen. Shen, this is our modern word, yeah. We just described what that mean. It's two, left, right. Left side, it's like some deity we need praise. Right side, lighting, like, yeah. So like we normally, if you see the word itself, the bend to your bend down your body, try pray something. That's general. And yeah, even more furthermore, for me, I got a different point about this one. This is so, I like the first one. Basically, governor a big country is similar to cook a small fish. This is huge. Basically, it's from, that's another culture. Like we normally separate. Our modern culture, let's see, the country is country, and family is family, person is a person. We separate those things. You see here is like connected from this country. How much like a cook one small fish? You think about the small fish. If you keep fry, flip over, flip back. Let's see. It's you're going to no shape. They're going to break the fresh fish. This one, for example, policy from company to country. If one, let's say, sheep, let's say 4 years term, we're going to change the governor. We're going to flip over again. You see, that's how suffering this face. You think about a metaphor, ordinary people. If I got a small business, they keep changing the ownership or governor policy or anything else. They're going to change my how to govern my small business. Another one I want to share is it's called Chinese called 生正影，生正在影正，生邪在影邪。生正不怕影邪 basically. If the body is right, the shadow is right. If the body is evil, the shadow is evil. The shadow you can consider is like 鬼 that part. So it's that I'm going to pause here and let's see you guys. Thank you.
No, I mean, I find that to excuse me. I find that to be very interesting. The way you described cooking the fish itself. That if you keep flipping it, that that it's a way of actually just it's a way of overcooking it or even disturbing it. But there's also there's kind of I was just thinking about it in the sense that where you're talking about the lack of continuity alone as well, in addition to not only interfering too much, but there's also this element of where you have no vision as to where you're going, and that can be disturbing in and of itself.
I can add more, if you want me.
Feel free. I mean,
Here's knowledge. We talk movie. What's the mean movie?
Right.
Non-effort, no conflict. When you do something, you benefit one side, you hurt another side.
Right.
Yeah, you flip face. That's why we very gently doing that when we cooking the face. So when you try for fry it, and that's one concept. Try, make policy smooth, continuous, build, build a house. You cannot go next day. I'm going to flick this brick over. So that's thank you. By the way, you see the relationship. The second sentence about the Dao. If you use Dao govern the world, then the last sentence the returns. You see, from Dao to the between is go. Use English. Let's use ghost and the God. And how they play, and then you see even the ghost, we consider the ghost. If you doing good, that's why Sheng Zheng, body is straight, you doing good, intention is good, nobody can. The ghost and even God, because you're doing good, nobody can hurt you because you're doing right. That's where you follow the Dao. The Dao, you come to a Dao. That's by nature. By these words, if you read by 2,000 years ago, people either understand, because they live a culture. They know this is like the indigenous people, how they live with those spiritual. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Jason, did you want to comment or reply to that?
Well, I think the most of I've heard a lot of English translation to say the fried fish, and actually the word the peng actually is cooking. So that's one of the Chinese punishment. Okay, during that time, the warring state time, they put the people cook. Okay, to punish the just like in Europe the auto-da-fé. Okay, so burn the people. But Chinese at that time they put the people in to punish. So I don't see it's of course you can interpret as Wu Wei as non-interference is no change. That like Kevin said, no change. Keep the policy the same as Wu Wei. Personally, I intend to think is this interference. So that means deal with especially the large country. You should be at least in the Taoist, my understanding of the Taoist, it should be this interfere. So the opposite of cooked small fish is barbecue. Okay, so a lot of country, especially large country, the leader kind of like exercise their muscle, okay, kind of put the hand on everybody's pocket. That's the opposite of the Tao is talking about. So that's my understanding of the Tao on the political sense. And that's why Ronald Reagan quote this one during his statement. And I think he's quite smart, a little bit side subject, Ronald Reagan, because at that time, the chief enemy is Russia, okay? And then that time, the America's policy is use China to fight against Russia. That's why I don't know any other president quote the Chinese philosopher, but at least Ronald Reagan quote this one. I think he has his own political meaning here. So.
Really, really quickly, and I know, Katie, you've been waiting patiently, but I agree with you that it's not Wu Wei, because that's initially what came into my mind. It's more of a minimalist approach. But something that we've spoken about here in the past that made me also think as to why they may say this is because this was a time of conflict and war. So that you would actually, a minimalist's approach would be somebody that may have power where you're not looking to exert that power and in conflict with the way. So that would be maybe one reason as to why this perspective was taken. I don't know if anybody wishes to comment on that, but that was just one thought that I had. Katie, thank you for waiting.
Yeah. I think also like the cooking a small fish, I agree with it saying like a minimalist thing. I think it's also not, I think it's still saying that it's still like an art to cooking it. Like if I don't know, maybe you guys are better cooks than me, but it's easy for me to burn even something like a fried egg so I think it's saying that it's still like a large undertaking. I think like even with someone like Reagan would probably agree with that it's hard to figure out what policies are going to work and not have unintended consequences. And then I liked the Jim Clatfelter because he kind of he took the liberties to secularize it. He said at center you harm no one and no one's able to harm you. So he focuses more on the aspect of harm rather than.
That is an area that we haven't explored. That essentially if you're not harming anybody else, that yes, you're kind of not allowing yourself to be harmed, not managing yourself to externals, and that was actually, and I had read that translation as well, and I thought that was something else, is that if you're a leader that is possessed with power and you're seeking things, that you're actually doing harm to yourself as well, and you're doing harm to others. So that it's kind of, again, that goes back to the idea that maybe this was written during a time of conflict between tribes, that would, and correct me if I'm wrong about that, Jason or Armand. So next up we have Madeline.
The way that Kevin put things about when the ruler is tuned into the Tao, then nothing can harm. The sage is tuned into the Tao, and then nothing can harm him. It seemed to correspond in some way with something we discussed at some point earlier in this series, which is the ruler is following the mandate of heaven, the celestial mandate. And so if things go badly wrong in the kingdom, it's because the ruler fell out of tune with the celestial mandate and therefore has to make amends by like a public apology, basically. I'm wondering if I'm reading too much into this, or if this does correspond to that idea.
That I don't know, but Aman, please, thank you.
I think, Madeline, you are onto something. The idea of the mandate of heaven was it was ubiquitous to Chinese rulers for thousands of years. And even today, you see it hinted at time and time again when Xi Jinping speaks in front of the Chinese people, that he's not said he literally has the mandate of heaven, but it's intimated and kind of understood. And even crises like the coronavirus are, in the minds of many Chinese, a referendum on whether or not there is legitimacy or illegitimacy or virtue or a lack of virtue to his current presidentship over the country. I do think it's significant, and I mentioned this before, but that the line is, when the Tao prevails over the world, then ghosts, spirits, sages start to follow. And that is kind of different than start off from the point of established Tao in your nation or established Tao in your world, because that sort of active doing is kind of the point of, you can't do that. It needs to be there in the first place for this harmony to begin to occur. To that end, if you are a ruler and you are seeing things go awry, then the way that things ought to be is not the way things are. And you should very quickly figure out why it isn't the way it ought to be. I do think that that has some overlap there, but I don't think Taoists were explicitly saying, you know, this is a referendum on your quality of the mandate of heaven. It was more of, subscribe to it, don't subscribe to it, but if the way is harmonious and prevalent in the land, well, you'll see the land and your own rule and your own ministers and your own spirits act in this way. If they're not acting in this way, then it's not prevailing. And if it's not, you ought to figure out why very quickly.
Thank you, Aman. Jason, you want to reply?
Yeah, I just like to directly respond to what Madeline's question. Yes, you read too much because what you're talking about, the heaven mandate and the follow, if the disaster happen, you have to apologize. I think that's more on the Confucius teaching, not in the Taoism teaching. So I don't think that's, Taoism doesn't reject this kind of thing, okay, the mandate from the heaven. But Taoism more on the disinterference than the interfere. Okay, so that's I like to comment. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any more comments? Anybody that wishes to comment on verse 60? If not, we'll move on to verse 61. But Brian, do you want to comment? I see you leaning forward. That's all. I'll just check with you.
Yeah, I just had a request actually, and then my pen and paper ready at the get-go when Evanique read her translation.
Yes.
And I thought there was some good stuff in there. I just would appreciate if she could read that again.
Yes, please, Evanique, would you be willing to read your version again? The Tao, what is it? The Tao from Christ, I believe. And yeah.
Sure. So chapter 60, the Tao of Christ, which is done by Marshall Davis. So chapter 60, governing a large nation is like frying a small fish. Too much poking ruins it. By simply obeying God, one can rule a vast nation. Evil will not be able to scare people. Religion will not be able to coerce people. Leaders will not be able to deceive people. When there is no fear, righteousness reigns.
Thank you.
that is a very powerful message. The idea that fear being, removing fear from the equation, especially the idea of coercion coming through religion, would be, something highly problematic. And it's interesting to see the Tao of Christ actually commenting from that.
Well, it's so funny because I was going to say something about that, but I thought the conversation was going in a different direction, so I didn't want to like interrupt that flow. But religion will not coerce people. I think the reason why it's in this particular one and in this particular way is because I think people use the Bible or Christ to justify many things, and to coerce people. And religion and politics is always, I mean, at least in this country, and I'm sure in other countries, have always been tied together, especially in Western culture. And I think in Eastern culture too, from what little I know of it. So Jason or Armand, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think because it's so tied in together, that religion is used to coerce, like it's like a mandate, like it's almost like a religious mandate for certain leaders that you have to claim that you're Christian in order to get elected. Like it's almost impossible. So I think that's why it's in there to show, if you're a good leader, if you truly obey God, this whole second verse about if you truly obey God, one can rule a vast nation because you're not worried about, you don't even care if people know. People will know it by the way you lead. And so I think when you have to say it or you're using religion to do it, you're not being a true leader, according to this anyway.
Oh, that's excellent, and I'm glad. Thank you, Brian, for asking Evanique to read that again. Yeah, because that actually, interestingly enough, speaks to the minimalist of interference, and it shouldn't be just seen as a government policy type of interference. It's your own desires for others that you need to minimize, your own wants. So I think that's the overriding theme. So maybe we could take the context out and say, or context of saying, or Ronald Reagan may have said this, he was using it with his narrative. I mean, the least interference could mean a lot of different things. So, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Evanique. Because when I read your translation, I just like to comment exactly what you are talking about, because I think the translation called obeying God and the religion will not coerce people. It's the essence of this chapter. Or even the translation is far away from the original text, but the essence is really there. And you ask the question, does it happen? We all know in Western world it happened. And Ronald Reagan take this one because communists fail, because the communists at that time try to interfere everything they want. So you are not doing cooking small fish, barbecue a cow, entire cow. So that's the way they come out. And it also happened in the traditional in Chinese, right? The Confucian, okay, the government always think they are Confucian as a mandate. Okay, so they do something for the good of people, try to build the good country, but turn out become coerce people to follow certain standard. So it happened around the world, and that's the reason Taoism bring up this one. I don't think anybody practice it. Ronald Reagan probably one of the person believe it to certain degree, but we can consider that's a thing to remind us.
Yeah, I don't think any politician actually practices a minimalist approach, whatever it may be. And they just, their belief systems, I think, are something that show up. We don't generally talk about politics, but this one, even again, Ursula Le Guin talked about how Thomas Jefferson would appreciate the first stanza as well. It's kind of appropriate in this moment. But I really do think that I thank you again. Thank you, Brian, for asking Evanique to read that again, because I think that that really speaks to it's that if you're following God, or if you're following the way, if you're following the Tao, you're doing what's virtuous. And what's virtuous is what, is what you feel to be the right thing to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean a particular platform for a political party per se. It's more about just doing the right thing regardless of the situation, which is very hard to do. And if the further you deviate from doing the right thing, and the more you become actually possessed by power, I think that takes you away from the way, and then that actually ends up and results in with a negative ends up with a negative result. So with that, if there aren't any other comments, we'll move on to number 61. So please type exclamation point in the chat if you would like to read the verse that spoke to you most for number 61. Evanique, thank you.
No problem. Let's get it up. So 61, it's again from the Tao of Christ, a Christian version by Marshall Davis. 61, a great country is like a good marriage. Humility is what makes it work. In a marriage, the wife has more control than the husband knows, though her power is more subtle and appears often as submission. In the same way, a great nation relates to smaller states with humility. A small nation relates to a large nation with respect and honor. By mutual submission, both nations prosper. Some nations stoop to conquer, others conquer by stooping. The highest mission of a large nation is to aid smaller nations and feed the poor. The highest mission of a small nation is to bring stability to the land and serve people. Both the large nation and the small nation can help each other fulfill their mission, but to do this takes humility.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up, I have David. I really like this verse, actually, in general.
Okay, I'm gonna use the Fing in English version. This verse has a lot of male, female, interesting connotation. I'll be interested to hear how
I'm interested to see what everybody says.
I'm waiting to see. I mean, I read over I don't know. I mean, I think that was it that I'm on like the Eno version. The Eno version is really interesting as well. I'll do the thing in English. Okay. A great country is like low land. It is the meeting ground of the universe, the mother of the universe. The female overcomes the male with stillness, lying low in stillness. Therefore, if a great country gives way to a smaller country, it will conquer the smaller country. And if a small country submits to a great country, it can conquer the great country. Therefore, those who would conquer must yield, and those who conquer do so because they yield. A great nation needs more people. A small country needs to serve. Each gets what it wants. It is fitting for a great nation to yield.
And can I ask you to read the one that Aman later after everyone, the one that Aman likes, the translation? Which translation was that?
Oh, I thought it was the NO, NO version.
You can read. Okay,
I can read it later.
Yeah. Okay. So next up, I have. I'm sorry. I have Margarita, followed by Katie, then Brian, or Penny.
Hi. Okay. Chapter 61 in Bahasa. Negeri besar harus merendah bagaikan sungai mengalir turun. hingga menjadi pusat perhubungan dan menjadi sifat perempuan di dunia. Dengan sifat perempuan yang diam lemah lembut, dapat menaklukkan pria di pengaruhnya. Maka jika negeri besar berlaku ramah dan rendah hati terhadap negeri kecil, dapat mengambil hati negeri kecil, sehingga negeri kecil menjadi sekutu mereka. Sebaliknya, negeri kecil yang menggunakan politik ramah tamah dan merendah terhadap negeri besar dapat memikat hati negeri besar untuk melindunginya. Maka negeri-negeri yang memiliki politik lunak akan senantiasa toleransi untuk mendapatkan perlindungan. Jika negeri besar tidak memiliki keinginan selain membantu memajukan kemakmuran negeri kecil, begitu pula negeri kecil memiliki tujuan tidak lain daripada bersekutu dengan negeri besar. Mereka akan mencapai keinginannya, akan tetapi negeri besar harus senantiasa rendah hati. What is interesting about this translation, it merely talks about the relationship between big countries and small countries. Even though there is some kind of relationship, a tendency to be like women, but no man and female relationship like previous translation. It's quite interesting. Thank you.
That's very interesting. Thank you for adding that. Next up, I have Katie, followed by Brian.
I'm reading from the Stephen Mitchell version. When a country obtains great power, it becomes like the sea. All streams run downward into it. The more powerful it grows, the greater the need for humility. Humility means trusting the Tao, thus never needing to be defensive. A great nation is like a great man. When he makes a mistake, he realizes it. Having realizes it, he admits it. Having admits it, he corrects it. He considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers. He thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts. If a nation is centered in the Tao, if it nourishes its own people and doesn't meddle in the affairs of others, it will be a light to all nations in the world. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. I look forward to your comments on that. Brian, or Penny, forgive me. I know it's usually Penny.
This is the J.H. MacDonald. A large country should take the low place like a great watershed, which from the low position assumes the female role. The female overcomes the male by the power of her position. Her tranquility gives rise to her humility. If a large country takes the low position, it will be able to influence smaller countries. If smaller countries take the lower position, then they can allow themselves to be influenced. So both seek to take the lower position in order to influence the other or be influenced. Large countries should desire to protect and help the people, and small countries should desire to serve others. Both large and small countries benefit greatly from humility.
Thank you very much. I like that translation as well. David, do you want to read or we'll just go to, do you want to just go to Jason? Feel free to pass.
I can read. Let me read a couple. Let me read the DC Lin and the so the DC Lin, a big country must be like the Delta low regions, being the concourse of the world and the female of the world. The female overcomes the male by quietude and achieves the lowly position by quietude. Therefore, if a big country places itself below a small country, it absorbs the small country. And if a small country places itself below a big country, it absorbs the big country. Therefore, some place themselves low to absorb others. Some are naturally low and absorb others. What a big country wants is but to shelter others. And what a small country wants is but to be able to come in and be sheltered. Thus, considering that both may have what they want, a big country ought to place itself low. And then the Eno version. A large state lies downstream. It is the female of the world. In intercourse, the female overcomes the male by means of stillness, because stillness lies below. Thus, when the large state takes the lower position, it controls the small state. When the small state takes the lower position, it places itself under the control of the large state. In the one case, the state takes the lower position to control. In the other, it takes the lower position to place itself under control. Large states wish no more than to annex and nurture people. Small states wish no more than to enter into service. Both gain what they wish. It is appropriate that the large dwell below.
Thank you for that, David. I really appreciate that. Jason.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, so let me explain some words first, since somebody asked about interesting about the male, female. I think most of the translation are not honest, loyal to the text. Only BC what David read it. Okay, use the word intercourse. That makes sense. Okay, so I think it's talk about yin and yang. Okay, like the male, female. That's put about in the 3 level. If we talk about the metaphysical level, that's yin and the yang. I believe everybody understand. So if talk about human level, we will talk in Chinese. We'll call a man, woman, a male, female. Okay, husband, wife. That's all in the human level. And then another level, so-called the animal level. That's the animal level. So here in Dao De Jing, most part, when they talk about male, female, they use animal level, which is pu and pin and the mu. Okay, mu means male, pin means female. And when we talk about the gender different in the animal level, we talk about the sexual organ. Okay, and that's the text is about. Remember on the chapter 55, they talk about the baby's penis. So in the Dao De Jing, in my understanding, they use a lot of words to use the sexual organ as a metaphor. So here they talk about the 天下之聘, that means the female of the world, okay, not the mother of the world. They don't call 天下之母, that means mother, but they use 天下之聘. Pin means female in the animal level. So I was assumed they talk about the sexual organ. So they talk about the large country is the world's the sexual organ. And they talk about intercourse because the female stay on the bottom and not move so much. I think that's the metaphor. Okay, in this text is using. So that's the translation I'm using here. Okay, so a large nation should be like the river delta at the lower position, which the world converges on. It is like the female of the world or the female sexual organ of the world. The female inevitably overcome the male by quiescence and staying low. Therefore, a large nation can stay low to the small nations, together, stay low to the small nations, together with small nation. A small nation can stay low to the large nations to join with the large nation. So staying low is together or to join with. The large nation only want to provide for more people. The small nation only want to partner with other people. In this way, both the large and the small nation can get what they want. Better for the larger nation to stay low. So here, when I do the translation, and if you pay attention on the English translation, they are talking about what large nation had to deal with the small nation, what small nation had to deal with the large nation. I think that's all different translation. The reason is they use this word, so-called qu, okay? This word, they say the large to small, you should use qu. Okay, let me not. this word qu, small nation, or the large also use qu. Okay, so they use the same word. You see 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And I did some research. I find out that's the reason has a problem, because the ancient time, these two words actually is the different word. Okay, so one is ju, one is qu. Okay, that means the large country treat small country have to stay low in order to ju, which is collect. Okay, so because they want to collect, okay, incorporate with the small nation, and the small nation should be stay low with the large nation because they want to go to the qu, means walking fast. So you can think about a large country and a small country. Okay, small country usually would go to large country to work. Okay, find the job. So I think that's the situation they are talking about. Large country, they want to use more people, and the small country they want to have the people going to large country to work with large country. I think that's the situation. Lao Tzu is talking about the large nation and small nation. If you see the map, I can show later. If you see the map of the international map during in the China during that time, you will see at the time so-called the spring and the autumn period. We don't know how many nations in China they have. Okay, people said over 100 or few hundred. Nobody knows how many countries, how many states, and the large and the small is humongous different. The some are so huge, some are so small. So I think that here is deal with the international affair. How to the large country should treat small country. How does the small country should treat large country? I think that's his Lao Tzu's try to deal with idea of international war. Yeah, thank you.
You're muted, Joe.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I was just going to say that that's very interesting how small and large countries could work together in a way, because it kind of says it'd be like water and flow. And that's a lot more yin than yang. So anyway, Aman, would you like to comment?
Yeah, this taken with the last one about too much poking can ruin something. I'm struck by the fact that if we think about these as lessons that are being taught to some young princeling, at some point that young princeling gets to the adolescent age and their eye and mind will wander from their lessons to every pretty girl that walks past them. And so you need to have a lesson that's going to land and hopefully have a few levels to it. I think these two chapters are exactly what that is meant to be. It's an admonishment to a young person. You know, large countries just want to go around and, you know, gather up every small nation they see. They want to, you know, they want to enter them. They want to, you know, there's so many different metaphors at work here that I think really are on a subtextual level about you need to be thoughtful about your wedding options, your marital options, what this will look like in your future. Because yes, there's all these, you know, pretty little nations out there, and I'm sure you want to get your hands on every one of them. But you need to remember how much power they're actually going to wield over you by virtue of being so demurring, so quiet, so alluring. You're going to lose yourself to these very powerful small nations. And lo and behold, what at first appeared small will actually be the larger of the nations, who actually seem to be, you know, the demurring, quiet housewife will actually be the tyrant of the household. And so be thoughtful how you go about making these selections. I just can read those lessons littered in these pages. And then when you flip back to the lesson before about, governing a small nation, i.e., marrying a nice woman, will be kind of like cooking a small fish. If you try poking and prodding at it too much, you're going to ruin it. And you need to make sure that harmony and accord is the measure of your home and your household. This strikes me as almost the Taoist take on Confucian values of family values, because the traditional Confucian ethos or ethic starts with setting the home right. The father be father, mother be mother. These are the hierarchies of relationship. Everybody know their place and do their job. That's kind of Confucian 101. What the Taoists are telling you is, okay, that looks good on paper, but when you really get behind those closed doors, that quiet, demurring little figure, that's the person who's going to have all the authority. That's the one who's going to have all the power. And so you need to partner with a small nation that provides for you. There's a great commentary. I won't read out one of the chapters, but I will read some of the author's notes here real quick. It is because of her stillness and low position. Let me see. Embrace and feed people. The great state plays a female role, holding her husband and feeding her children. Enter in and serve people. The small state plays a male role, penetrating his wife and serving her children. So those commentary really kind of just lay bare the metaphor that's at work here, but I think it's meant to work on many levels, because this is a teacher who's supposed to be teaching you how to be a ruler, but at the same time probably knows that you're not going to be worth much if every night going home is just misery upon misery upon misery, and it's up to you to make the decisions to keep that from happening. So that's what I love about these two chapters taken together. The advice that I see them imparting, not so much in the text, but in the subtext of, we're this far into the lessons. How old is this princeling, and where are his interests wandering to?
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Actually, I really appreciate how you compare and contrast that with, I'm sorry, with Confucianism. I'm sorry. And so anyway, I there's a few things in there I appreciate. I'm gonna get a sip of water. Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Jones. For me, there's my comment. I took a little bit of notes this time. This, like Aman said, these two chapters very, close to. First one is to talk about the internally, how do you government a country, even a big country like similar to cook on a small fish. Here is between a nation. How do you build a relationship, big and small? That's one word. The solution is humility. Build the relationship. Or you can use another way. Use my face. So let's see, if for nationwide comprehensive national power. That's, for example, our, don't blame me. For example, we got a superpower here. I can, so, I got military, economic, and anything. You have to listen to me. My rule is first. My story is only story. I can't build that. You have to follow this. My rules. That's one story, and it works. But this is how sustainable, we don't know. But here, if we base this chapter, we should, even we big station, is a nation, we still should humble with other people, other small state. They're going to show you respect, not because of the fear. And yeah, if you're doing the fear part, you can put a section, or you put a, let's see, you put something nice, they're going to nice to you. It's sometimes nation to nation. It's like human to human. How to make friends. Thank you.
That's actually something, and Katie, I know you're waiting, so thank you for being so patient this evening. That's an interesting point that I had thought about when I had read this, was this idea, and you said humility, Kevin. And I was just thinking this idea of how we're even thinking of what constitutes power in general, and that humility is actually a form of power, or even a
Yeah.
form of non-action. If you think about things like Gandhi, for example, the idea of non-action, and as a way of actually exerting power, would be, an example of that, just one example. But I thought about this, what you were saying is humility, or I just thought to me as a way of just reassessing overall what we think it is to have power over another entity at all.
Yeah, to add one more is even back to a normal value system. For individual, we think about, we value great, we pride, we are America, we are a great country, not just great, we're going to build greater again. So you see those slogans, it sounds good, but however, this who are I'm South as American, right? So how about other countries? Do we should carry the, how can it grow together? That can, we need a little bit of deep thought about that from an individual, think through, maybe get a better understanding overall. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Katie.
Yeah, my brain just went. What was I thinking? Yes, now my thought came back. It's about the path of like submission to power. If you work in politics today, you'll hear from people like you have to pay your dues. There's no like going and walking up to somebody and just telling somebody how it is. Like you have to respect the power of people higher than you. So you have to like, I think that's true in any like transitioning to like normal life. Like you have to, like in a job too, like you don't go up to the president probably and say like, hey, I think this is what needs to be changed. Like you probably first start by, showing that you listen to instructions and that you're friendly, and you demonstrate your value, and then you get noticed for what you do for people, and then you build a respect for yourself, and then you get promoted, and so it's a process. I don't know how it works on the upper level with I don't ask questions and stuff like that. But my second thought, I agree with Kevin on that. We often use power as they're saying, like power as like force, like using money. I agree with him that might not be sustainable. Also, I really enjoyed the small nation to large nation, because like smaller countries really need to rely on alliances for help if they want to defend themselves from situations. So we can even see that right now in current politics with, somewhere like Ukraine, they don't have NATO there. We're like, are there, so, but I don't really want to go take and make people, I don't want to stress people out, but I'm just saying the point of alliances is a timeless thing.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, I mean, well, first of all, does anybody else have any other comments before I make a comment?
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Kind of a question here. Okay, so probably Aman would be better to answer this question. He probably read a lot interpretation. So I see a lot of English translation talk about humanity here. Okay, and I look at the Chinese, they have the two ren, people show up. I just don't see humanity in this text. Okay, so I just like to see, and strictly on the technical point of view, I'm not talking about should we do humanity or not. But on this page, I just look very hard in Chinese. I just don't see humanity here. So I just want to know, where does the humanity coming from?
Humanity or humility?
Humility.
Humility.
Yeah, is that
We weren't at the bottom, so.
I think that's because it's the gentle way. Can everyone hear me? Or am I
Yes.
kind of
Yep.
out again? Okay. I think it's the gentle way of using the image of submission, which is much more a sexist interpretation of normal gender roles, but would be understood as the power of a woman through her ability to be submissive. That was, I think, the more traditional version, whereas humility sort of softballs that idea and makes it more palatable to a modern reading audience.
Thank you.
so among you, the submissive, the humanity is coming from the idea of the submissive in this text.
That's where I think they're getting it from. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I can get it because too far away from my thinking. So thank you.
No, I agree. It's a misnomer. It's a misnomer of what it means, but it's being done to, like I said, make it palatable to a modern reading audience without having sort of the sexist overtones that would be not considered sexist in 4th century China. They would just be considered, well, duh, that's how it's supposed to be.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. I'm sorry. My throat is not right at the moment. Margarita.
Yes. There's 2 points. One, maybe this is not important because I get the point is about being feminine, being the female. But when Jason said that it's female organ, can you explain what is that? Is it womb or like vagina? Because sometimes it means different thing in different symbols. I just wonder. And second, because I'm a female reading this, yeah, it is like something that the like common concept that female is expected like that, and male expected like that, should be something comes from within. But I mean, in the current society, it's not always like that. Just like Katie and the rest of people saying that big countries, they exert their power to make small countries subdominate, so like to follow them. And also in the society, male do that. It's not protecting, but exerting their power to make sure that female be submissive. So, and I know this is for leaders in China, 4th century, but how does that still be relevant to us to now? I mean, maybe this is a discussion that we can take also from that. It's not just taking this different sex gender roles thing, but what we can infer from this. Thank you.
Jason, would you like to reply to that?
Okay, about the sexual organ, I think that's vagina. Okay, because it can receive. I think that's this way. And then in the chapter 55, you talk about the baby boy doesn't know. He used the word called 聘母之和. That means harmonize of the animal version of male and the female. So that I think it only means the sexual reproductive organ, okay, nothing else. At least I'm thinking this way.
Brian, followed by Kevin or Penny.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to kind of give my take on it. I mean, I was very intrigued by what Aman said about, you know, the undertones of relationships and stuff like that in China. But I was thinking, you know, from the viewpoint of the rulers, that they're giving advice to rulers, and clearly if some countries are really big and some are small, I mean, I think that they would have a tendency to think that they can push them around and get whatever they want, and they don't have to really think about the needs of the small country or something like that. They're just going to be thinking about themselves and what they want. And so I see it as them saying, well, you know, actually, you shouldn't just think of it that way. You really got to look at you know, the other nation and what they need too, and what would, you know, would be good for them, not just look at it from your own viewpoint. And that's what I thought, kind of taking the low position is looking at it from the view of somebody else. And that way they would be more successful in dealing with other nations. Because other small nations are obviously going to resent it if they're just trying to dominate them.
Absolutely. And and actually I agree with that. I mean, in the sense that there is a simple, like an understanding that the other nation is a partner. It's not necessarily your adversary. And that actually, that word is actually used in Jason's translation as well. So and next up we have Kevin. Thank you, Penny. Oh, or Kevin, could we let him on? Comment?
No. Let Kevin go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Amanda, you're gonna send me critic about my comment. First about a modern language. The language itself, word itself is problematic. Ourself was so sensitive, get more sensitive about the word itself. For example, this yin and yang, then ping and mu. If you think for the first sentence, using imagination about ocean, river, lake, and creek, what's the relationship between those? If you imagine ocean is a big, as all river is a big country. Let's see, creek is a small country. What's the relationship? River need those creeks, the water flow to there. They get bigger. They need this more water. Creek, if you don't have flow to the river, what's going to happen? Dry it out. So that I would say, forget that we don't, our mind don't focus to narrow down this, you know, female or that. That's original mean. That's beautiful about the Chinese word. Is from origin. What's come from? Let's describe animal. And if from the mountain, the river, you can use that metaphor. So obviously that's not what we learn from it, right? So that's a two for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Aman.
Yeah, I wanted to point out the subversiveness of this passage. If it's very easy to sort of get lost seeing the forest for the trees, but it opens, and I'm going to read a version here. A great state is like a river's lower course. She is the feminine aspect of the world. In the mating of the world, the feminine always conquers the masculine by stillness. There's something in this that is the message that the great nation is the feminine. In other words, the female is the great nation. And it toys with this idea because it is natural for a young princeling to believe that he is the embodiment of his nation and his nation is great and it is the large, great nation of the world. But what this text actually says when you read it is that, no, you'll be great by taking the low position, by submitting, by being in the lower position, which is very, very subversive, especially if you think of it in sort of a marital guide or in that sort of family harmonious relationship guide. Be the lesser, be the one who acquiesces. You'll be greater for it is kind of the underwriting and ongoing message throughout this passage. And that flies in the face of that sort of Confucianistic, normative values that Margarita was talking about, that the men go out and, force their will upon their women and dominate them in order to make them into submissive. The advice here is saying just the opposite. You do the opposite, you'll be stronger for it. You should follow the example you can see in how these feminine great nations provide for all and aren't just worried about running around entering every great nation they see.
Thank you for that. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly on a number of levels. Specifically, this idea that I think that if a masculine nation that's too rigid, or that's actually looking to conquer, it's a warning against that. That's the way I see it. And the way to dominate, the way to live in harmony with nature, is essentially by following the female, the yin, as not being too rigid or imposing your values on anyone else. And I think it actually complements number 60 in that, in the sense that 60, I thought as well, in how number 60 essentially says, no, don't impose your desires on the people. And takes a minimalist perspective. It takes a much more yin approach to managing a country, as opposed to, and I know that we got into the examples of it being used in political spectrum, but I just think it was more along the lines of embrace the yin than it was anything else. And I can see that as well here. So there was a connection between 60 and 61 that Aman had made for us earlier. Are there any other comments? Shikant, would you like to make a comment? I know you just walked in, but there's always something.
No,
Okay.
I'll wait till the end. I do have comments at the end.
Okay.
Because
Well,
I kind of see Simon.
oh, okay. So we have
Yeah.
Evanik followed by. Can I let Evanik go first,
Yep,
and then?
absolutely, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking of when everybody was talking about the nations and the male and female relationship is this idea of submission. And I think when you're talking about submission, there's a choice, right? In order to make someone submit, they have to make the choice to submit. And so if they're going to submit, like if people are going to submit to your leadership, in traditional families, it talks about the wife submitting to the husband. There has to be a choice, but there's also an obligation in that. And that if you're going to submit to someone, that they're going to treat you honorably. And so I think with this chapter on 61, I think the first paragraph is just, it seems like it's key. A great country is like a good marriage. Humility is what makes it work. In a marriage, the wife has more control than the husband knows, though her power is more subtle and appears often as submission. And I think in order to have the smaller nation submit to the greater nation, you have to treat that smaller nation well, or otherwise you're going to have conflicts, and you see that in so many different areas. So I think there's this thing throughout this chapter is that you have to respect the other nation that you want to partner with. And I think someone said it in one of their comments. The key is a partnership. Like, what does each nation bring to each other? Like a marriage, like what is each person bringing in to the marriage to make the marriage work? And how are you going to deal with conflicts? And how are you going to deal with things that come up? And I think the key, if you're talking about a marriage of nations in a sense, is respect for each other. And both sides, I think, really have to, in a sense, submit to each other for the greatness of the marriage of nations as a whole.
I like that a lot. I mean, in the sense that how there there is a give and take in marriage, any successful marriage or any successful relationship. And it also talks about the importance of balance, which is, again, you don't want to be too much yin, you don't want to be too much yang. You know, there's an important of give and take. I mean, I know that, you know, using the example that we were your first paragraph, it was a little bit different than the translations that we had written. But again, I think it adds another layer and another level of understanding of using a relationship of a marriage, of what is a successful marriage and what would it be to be successful relationship between a large and a smaller nation. It was interesting also to see the priorities of those in Jason's translations. Like the smaller nation's priorities are partnership, whereas a larger nation's priority is staying together. Is that correct, Jason? Just really, yeah.
Can,
Go ahead.
can I interrupt for one?
Please, yeah, by all means.
I'm going to share the screen. Okay, I just want to make sure. Oh, are we in the right?
That's
thing?
not the translation.
Well, the map. Everybody see the map?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I just want to let people know, okay, when we talk about international, that's the map we are talking about, okay? So I'm afraid probably not people in imagination maybe different. So you look at the map, Beijing, okay, is here, Shanghai is here, Xi'an is the Terracotta Army is here. So basically that's the land, okay? You talk about the Hong Kong, China, Hong Kong, Guangdong, all this one all barbarian. So if you look at this map, okay, the white one is barbarian land, so we don't consider. So this one is that's the nation we are talking about. That's the nation of the big nation, small nation we are talking about. And nobody knows how many nations, how many during this time. Some people say 100, couple 100, because from time to time you dig through the old ancient text, you find, hey, here's another country. Hey, here's another country. So actually we don't know, but at least that gives you an idea. When we talk about international, large country, small country, that's the situation we are dealing with. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. The more context, the better. So I have Kevin, followed by Margarita, then Brian or Penny.
Thank you, guys. I think everyone reached the, the great point. The greater should be lower. Like I'm going to read the Margarita's comment. A great country is provider, like a mother. Bracket. It is. You think the this chapter first sentence, big country, the flow underflow. Everybody word by word underflow. Then the end of the sentence also, bigger. It's better stay under. And above this sentence, they also this two side obtain their own benefit or own desire. Small got something, bigger got own interest. So, but the conclusion is bigger. I like recommend based tax stay under. But in practice, it's a different story. We saw pride, we saw power. But why show you humility? Why humble to you? I thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Margarita, thank you for waiting.
Thank you for today's discussion. I think there could be three things I see from this verse. One is task division. That's my initial understanding. So A is not B, big is not small. But later, after hearing from you, it could be also partnership. So A plus B become AB. So male brings something, female brings something. That could be a partnership. But after listening Amon's explanation, I start to think this could also be a dance between female and male, between provider and the take and the receiver. So it probably also in countries level or maybe female-male relationship, when somebody tried to be the provider, the other will be the receiver. But the receiver will not always be a receiver. They can also provide to some extent, and that there will be a dance. Large nations sometimes also need small nation, and small nation can provide something. And in addition, that could be a dance, a dynamic interaction between A and B. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Great comments. I have Brian. Thank you. Followed by Jason, then Shrikant.
So there's been a lot of talk about submission, and I think that probably is the right term and a good term in this context. But I think it's useful to remember that before there's submission, there's usually some preliminary act, and that would be some kind of overture from the other party. And if there's an overture from the other party, then you can decide whether or not to be submissive. So that's one element. The other element is that I like the metaphor, and Kevin pointed this out, of the water flowing into the ocean, the creek flowing into the river. I think there's a power in we're talking larger and smaller here. There's a power in the larger country that does not exist in the smaller one, or may not exist. And that is that the larger one can absorb the smaller one. And then not just one or two small ones, it could absorb two or three small ones. And actually by absorbing one, two, or three of them, no one of those smaller countries is going to have a predominant influence. And since the power of the bigger country is that it's not really, it doesn't become the smaller country, it is reformed or revised, it is transformed by the smaller country. So it's big country version 1, big country version 2, version 3, as it absorbs these smaller countries. And it's probably made better because of it. Now, Jason put up the map of from that period, and it's a good one. The context I can understand is the history of the United States, where we have been open, and there have been a lot of smaller countries that have been where the people have been attracted here, or the country themselves have wanted to ally with us. There is something, just like the female, that these smaller countries, like the male, are attracted to the bigger country, and the bigger country has this power that they can be receptive and submissive.
That's a really interesting point, and I like the use of the United States specifically. And it is an integration. And that integration, it leads to a transformation as well, as to what you actually are. So that it does need to be, although it does need to be a partnership. Otherwise, you're forcing the other nation to conform to your standards, which you're not changing at that point. But I think it's telling us to essentially to integrate by essentially by being a partner, not necessarily being a using a yang approach where we're imposing our views on the other group. Next up, I have Jason, but followed by Shrikant.
Oh no, I'm coming. That's my old hand. So thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that map, by the way. Shrikant.
Yeah, I always think of these things at kind of psychological and philosophical level. So this poem reminds me of several things. It reminds me of Francis Bacon's dictum that nature, to be commanded, must be obeyed. That you have to actually listen to nature, what nature is telling you, in order to do anything with it. It reminds me of Sapolsky's dictum, strong opinions weakly held. So because they are weakly held, that means they are open to correction, that you are actually, you will yield to anything that is coming in. That makes them stronger as a result of it. It reminds me of psychological measurements of openness and conscientiousness. So being able to take things in, being open to the world and letting it change you, and being strong in initiation. It's kind of like, as Brian was pointing out, it is about America. It is accepting of all people, anybody who comes in, which gives it incredible strength as a country. So and the process is like breathing in and breathing out. So you have to breathe in, you have to take in what is there and yield to it. And then you breathe out. You can breathe out stronger. You can initiate better. You can command better. You can have stronger opinions. You can have strength of a country. If you obey nature, if you are open to feedback, if you are open to correction of your opinions, and if you are open to people. Thanks.
Thank you. That's beautifully put. I mean, I really, when I thought about this as well, I thought it was another aspect of it that you just highlighted was fixed versus growth mindset. Where a fixed mindset is something that you feel like you already know, that you're closed, that this is the world to me, versus a growth mindset that is open and integrates and listens and integrates people. And I like the three examples that you used, the Francis Bacon and Sapolsky, and as well as the United States. I think that these are all, I mean, excellent examples. And yeah, essentially when I first read this, I thought back to when I originally started reading about the Tao. And one of the things that they feel in the West, that I was just reading an overall assessment of it, is that the West is too fixed, sometimes too yang, and not enough yin, where it would actually, there's this balance. That that if you're too rigid, then you're not integrating. So this one spoke to me. I really like this particular verse a lot. Would anybody else
may
like
I just make one comment?
Please. You don't even have to
again
ask.
the same. It's the same issue of nature and culture. So what this is saying is that listen to nature,
right,
and let culture be shaped by nature by continuously listening to nature.
Beautiful. Kevin. Kevin.
Katie ahead of me. Katie was in time. Katie. You want to go? Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, but you know what? I missed Katie. So
Yeah,
can I go back? Can I go back to Katie first? So thank you.
Yeah, I went to a meetup on feedback, and I remember he was talking about he was talking about feedback makes somebody a better person, and then it got me to thinking about his thoughts on it, and I was like, well, that makes it kind of seem like the person needs to be fixed, and I was like, people should feel like they're okay how they are. But I think like part of what I was able to reason through in my thinking is that a perfect person for me, and of course no one's like perfectly perfect, but let's pretend a perfect person for me is not acting perfectly, but it's just doing your best and accepting feedback to help you come across the way you want to come across. So for me, that's a perfect person. It's not acting perfectly. Like that, the acceptance of feedback to me would make you, closer to perfect than someone who doesn't. It's just not about that. It's not about perfect action for me. It's more about being able to accept and hear.
Yeah, I look at it as very much an internal process where you're focused on listening and you're focused on yourself. You're focused on taking things in as opposed to speaking and just putting your opinion out there. So this is about the fixed and growth mindset that I was thinking about when I read this. It's about integration and learning how to integrate as much information as possible without necessarily imposing your will. Kevin, my apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. For me, actually, strength of mental culture and nature. What's that to relationship? You can use yin and yang. Nature is yin. It could be the mother of nurture. We focus the culture, or normally we build our own culture, man-made. We focus that part. We forget our nature. This chapter and the last chapter, we learn from nature. How our Earth universe located, a mountain on the top, and a creek, river, then the sea. So how they position. That's how we should, supposed to be work that way too, as a human being, organize a culture, relationship. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So, if there are no other comments, I would like to hand things over to Shrikant so he could talk about some of the upcoming meetups, and the ones that I'm most excited about is the Dao.
Yes.
And so I hope you're going to mention that.
No, I'm going to talk mostly about that first.
Good.
So I'm very excited about that. I'm just very grateful to Jason and Amon for the translations, because they've just opened up this entire world. I spent a lot of time on Dao De Jing. I've listened to it many times in many versions. But what Jason's translation does is that it allows me to dive in. See, I'm handicapped by the fact that I can't read Mandarin. So what he's doing is that he's taking me like at least maybe 10% of the way, 20% of the way of kind of appreciating some of the characters. What are the choices involved in interpretation of it? So what we are going to do, that was one part of it. So I wanted to focus on that. Second, the translations are very different when they are read as a whole. When you take in a whole bunch of these verses, they have a very different impact on you, because you start to see connections between them. And so what we are going to do is that we are going to take maybe about 37 verses. That's the goal. We're going to try to cover 37 verses this Sunday. So what will happen is that Jason will put the text on the screen and invite people to read it. So one person will read, so we'll go 3 verses at a time. So I strongly recommend that you read Dao De Jing beforehand. There are versions. I like the Ursula Le Guin version. It is available on YouTube. You can listen to it in 47 minutes. That's it. So you can listen to it many times. That's a great way of kind of, orienting yourself. Or you can read whatever you prefer. So we're going to go 3 verses at a time. So somebody will read 3 verses, and then Jason will comment on the 3 verses for about 2 to 3 minutes. Amon will comment in for 2 to 3 minutes. Then everybody will get to talk about the verses. When you're talking about the verses, we have to be very short, very concise, because we're trying to get the effect of reading the whole thing. So if we take like 40 minutes to discuss 3 verses, then we don't get that effect. So we have to do it in 12 minutes total, in order that something like that, 10, 12 minutes. So you have about a minute or so. So just the highlights, you don't go into details. What are the biggest things that you get from the verse, and what big connections you see? Where do you see it fitting in the Dao De Jing as a whole? What connections do you see between that verse and other verses? Just that, just very brief comment, no questions, and we'll go to the next one, and we'll let this entire work flow over us. Okay, so I think that's going to be very special. So we'll do that for 1 to 37 this Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to limit it to 2 hours. So it's not going to be a 5-hour meetup, Evanik. Don't worry. No.
Wait, hey,
It was fun, right?
We had a 5-hour meetup with the Gospel of John.
The Gospel of John was 5 hours.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but it was still fantastic. But we'll do this only for 2 hours. And if we can't finish 37, then we will just do it 2 weeks from now. We're going to do the second session. And if need be, we can add a third session. And in 3 sessions, we should definitely be able to finish it. I think we can finish it in two sessions. All right, so that's the plan. The other thing is that these connections, I am just completely getting blown away by these connections between these 3: the Bible, Dao De Jing, and Bhagavad Gita. For me, Bhagavad Gita is coming online finally. I'm now able to read listen to the whole thing in 2 hours, and I've been doing that many times now. So I feel comfortable with the text. And we have this guy Yogeshwar, who's incredibly good. So, and he has the right kind of attitude of a seeker, learner. He's very, very learned, by the way. He reads Sanskrit. He's reading translations. He's reading all the major commentaries in Sanskrit on Bhagavad Gita. And he's been doing that for the past 4 years. So he really has spent like maybe close to 100 hours on each of those chapters, in reading in Sanskrit and commentaries. So it's just very, very deep. And what I try to do is that I know maybe 1% of that, but what I do is that I have enough that I can understand what is being said. And what I try to do is that I try to make it, to relate it to what the audience is. That's my job. So I try to kind of make it easy for people to see it. I try to answer questions. He's coming from an Indian context, so he may not be able to relate the idea, but I'm able to understand what he's saying, and then I try to relate it. So that is fantastic. Aquinas is blowing me away. So I took the break because I had to prepare for my Aquinas meetup, which is chapter 8. And the chapter 8 is so deep. The commentary of Aquinas is 50 pages. I managed to cut it down to 14 pages of commentary. And I've come up with a plan of kind of talking about just a few verses here and there. But that meetup is there. I mean, the only problem that I have with Bhagavad Gita and Gospel of John, and it's a great problem to have, is that on each of the verses, so we can do maybe like 5 verses of each of these, and there is enough there, enough richness for a whole meetup. And the depth that we are going into and all kinds of themes we are extracting from it are just incredible. So I recommend both those meetups very highly to all of you, and especially people who are, I'm noticing this in many people like Evanik or Joe who are attending, or Brian who are attending many of these meetups. I think, let's see who else is. I think Kevin attends many. Jang attends many of them. So what is happening is that there are all kinds of cross connections that are happening between the meetups. I did a meetup on Sunday about, it's on YouTube now, center and periphery, about themes between these 3. And it's just mind-boggling. And I'm beginning to just see commonalities, but then next level is to see the differences as well, because there are significant differences. and trying to put it all together. How do you combine all of them and make the most of it? I'm delighted to report that Yasuhiko is going to be back, and he's actually thinking along similar lines. It's very odd, his journey is very parallel to what we are doing. When he decided to do Dao De Jing, I was also doing Dao De Jing. Now I'm doing Bhagavad Gita, he's also doing Bhagavad Gita. But what he's going to be talking about, he's going to be coming once a month from now on, starting I think February 6th or so, that weekend on Sunday. And the topic that he's going to be talking about is future of spirituality. His point is that you need to take in the spirituality of the West, India and China and Japan and everywhere you can find it, and see how do you actually use it effectively today? How do you integrate it into the modern world? And what he's saying is that it is different. Modern world is different. You have to respect the modern world and you have to bring that in. So that's going to be something incredible. So, all right. So that's all I had.
That's a huge announcement. That's awesome. No, I'm serious. That we're going to be actually how to integrate
I find
that.
it very difficult to be more concise than this. I try, but
what do you mean? It was perfect. I mean, but it was just that's all. That's
no.
awesome.
No. I understand. Sorry, no, I was just kidding. Yeah. No,
yeah,
it is so much going on. Go ahead. Sure.
No, I'm really looking forward to that Yasuhiko meetup to see how we can integrate these things into the modern world.
Yeah.
Let me say, if I may,
yes.
A lot of you have come, I've kind of noticed off and on, to more or less most, maybe all of the meetings. I've done my best to be at all of them.
Yes.
It is, I am in awe of what we're doing, and I think it's a lifetime opportunity. So I would encourage you all to, if you can, arrange your schedules to do this. It's really great.
Well, thank you, Brian. And coming from you, who has spent all his life studying with a very deep base in the Bible, I mean, it's really good. And I genuinely think that that's the case. Partly because I think we are onto something.
Yes.
We are trying to put together kind of commonalities and differences between these three large cultures. The West, the Chinese culture, and the Indian culture. And then many other things can be integrated with it. But those three are so large and so different from each other that if you can see and operate in all of them, at least a little bit, even like you don't have to understand, it's difficult to actually understand another culture. But even if you get like 5%, 10%, I think it makes your life a lot richer. And the beautiful thing here is that we have a very interesting group of people with strengths in these different things. And this is all being integrated with, people have strengths in science and, modern life, modern psychology, and all of that is actually getting integrated. Yes. Slowly. And we are being very patient. We are treating each of these works with the respect that they deserve, because you really need to, they're very, very deep works. And we are taking the time to dive into them deeply, discuss them deeply. And this approach of doing this in a multi-perspectival way, where everybody is bringing their own perspective, that's, I think, the only way to go. And it's a diverse perspective. See, what happens is that if you're doing this in let's say a philosophy department, that is a very narrow perspective.
Yes.
You're limiting it's a certain age group of people, certain kinds of people, certain kinds of institutional thing. This is very broad. And it's just, and the people here are just incredible, individually. And I think the other thing that has happened is that we have developed a level of respect for each other. We have developed confidence in each other. We feel comfortable in expressing our thoughts, being vulnerable, asking questions, disagreeing, all of that, which is leading to a really deep dialogue. And nobody is trying to push people to be a certain way at all. So everybody can pursue this as an individual quest in their own way and commune with each of these things deeply, and then bring that to the table. I mean, it is, so Brian, I agree with you. I think it is just incredible what we are doing. I don't know where it's, I know it's going to be good. I know it's going to be very significant. I don't see why I should be doing anything else, because this is so good. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I see many possibilities. So I'm really thrilled with what we are doing.
Yeah, something that you said that I think that really resonates to me is that it's beneficial for all, and that is so rare. As you mentioned, you'll get a very narrow perspective in a philosophy department, but it's also a safe place where if you're just exploring these texts for the first time and you're just learning, just like this evening, I could ask, things about warring states, and to get perspective at that time. Most times that if you get in an environment where it's kind of adversarial or competitive, that you don't feel comfortable asking questions. And so that this is actually for everyone, where everybody's learning from one another. And it's really exciting. I mean,
and the other thing is that there are many people, many of us who know a little bit more on a particular topic
right.
than others. And I really like their approach, whether it is Yogeshwar or Jason or Amon, or, many of these Yasuhiko, all of them, they have the attitude is that they are trying to learn. And that is the most important thing to them.
Right.
And they express their full understanding, but they also are listening. And I think that's just fantastic. So I think regardless of the level of knowledge, you benefit. I mean, one of the things that Jason said that stood out is that he's getting a lot of value from these conversations. That's the same thing with like Yogeshwar. Yogeshwar is blown away by what we are doing with Gita,
right.
because it's not generally, that's not how, or people who know the Bible very well, like Brian or David who come, they love it because it is genuinely engaging something that they love in a different way and from all these perspectives. So and this is very much, and for me, this is a deep part of the Indian culture. Seeker is very deep. I'm going to talk about this in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between Arjun and Krishna. Now, Krishna is God. Arjun is man. But they are best friends. Okay, Krishna is the best friend of Arjun, and Arjun is the best friend of Krishna. They're standing in the middle of the battlefield and they're talking about the deepest ideas. You can see the love between them. You see the respect between them. You see that Arjun is asking questions. Whenever he thinks Krishna says something that doesn't make sense to him, he calls him out. He says, "You're asking me, you just told me that knowledge is the best way, and you're asking me to act. Why? Why are you asking me to act? You just said that knowledge is better than action." So all of that, so that openness to inquiry, the reverence for learning, and respect for anybody who is genuinely trying to learn, no matter what their level of knowledge, higher or lower. I think that's one of the greatest things that I've picked up from the Indian culture. So I'm glad to see so many of you are Indian in that way.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things that has resonated with me most during these meetups, and the idea that God is inside of all of us. That's
wonderful,
critical. So,
all right, folks. So thank you very much. Joe, do you want to close the meetup?
Oh no, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for showing up as always. It's an honor to be here with everybody, and I really look forward to Tuesday nights. It's the one night, one night of the week I really just I'm very, very grateful for. So thank you, everyone. And I hope to see everybody soon.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Joe. Thank you, Shrikant. Thank you,
Bye.
Jason.